You were the child who did not quite feel like a child. Maybe you sat with adults and understood too much. Maybe teachers called you mature, relatives called you wise, and other kids felt loud, careless, or strangely far away. Maybe while everyone else seemed to be learning how to become a person, you already felt like you had been one for years. And for a long time, that probably sounded like a compliment. But here's the thing. Feeling older than your age does not always mean you were simply more advanced, more serious, or somehow born with a deeper soul than everyone around you. Sometimes it means life handed you emotional weight before your nervous system was ready to carry it. Sometimes what people called maturity was actually adaptation. Not fake, not imaginary, not dramatic. Adaptation. You thought you were just different, quiet, responsible, hard to impress, maybe a little detached. But the deeper reason may be that childhood did not feel like a place where you could fully rest inside your own age. You were paying attention too early, watching moods too early, reading tension too early. And when a child starts managing the emotional weather of a room before they even understand their own feelings, something shifts. Psychologists sometimes call this parentification. It sounds clinical, but the idea is painfully human. It means a child begins taking on emotional or practical roles that were never meant to belong to them. Maybe you became the listener, the peacemaker, the helper, the one who knew not to make things harder. Maybe nobody said it out loud, but you learned that your job was to stay calm, stay useful, stay easy, and maybe even stay strong for people who were supposed to be strong for you. And that does something strange to a person. On the outside, it can look impressive. You become composed early, you understand adult emotions early, you notice what people need before they say it. You become the one who knows how to read silence, how to predict reactions, how to sense when something is off from the way a door closes or a voice changes by half a tone. Other people see depth. What they often do not see is the cost of developing that depth before you ever got to be soft. Here's where it gets interesting. A lot of people who always felt older than their age were not trying to grow up fast because they were ambitious. They were trying to grow up fast because it felt safer. If the adults around you were unstable, overwhelmed, unpredictable, emotionally absent, or quietly fragile, your nervous system may have come to one brutal conclusion. Being small is dangerous. Being needy is risky. Being childish is not welcome. So you began moving toward control, responsibility, and self-containment because those felt like protection. That is why some children become old in the eyes before they become old in years. It's not because they've seen everything, it's because they've learned that innocence has a price. They learned to think before speaking, to scan before relaxing, to prepare before hoping. They become careful with joy, careful with mess, careful with need. And when that pattern repeats for long enough, it stops feeling like a temporary response and starts feeling like personality. So later in life, you might say things like, "I've always been this way. I've always been the mature one. I've always felt different from people my age." But there's a difference between who you are and how you survived. That's one of the hardest truths in this whole conversation, because when survival becomes your identity early enough, it's easy to mistake exhaustion for wisdom, emotional distance for strength, and chronic self-control for maturity. But there's more going on. Children who feel emotionally responsible for the people around them often become adults who cannot stop monitoring everything. They anticipate problems before they happen. They feel guilty resting. They feel strangely uncomfortable being taken care of. They are often deeply reliable and deeply tired at the same time. They can love people hard, show up fully, carry more than their share, and still feel this private resentment they barely let themselves name. Why? Because somewhere deep down, care stopped feeling like something you receive and started feeling like something you perform to keep life stable. And this is where it stops being simple. The world rewards this pattern. People praise you for being grounded, for being thoughtful, for not being dramatic, for handling so much so well. They lean on you, trust you, admire your composure. But praise can become a trap when it keeps rewarding the wound. Because if your identity is built around being the capable one, the calm one, the emotionally advanced one, then who are you when you're confused, messy, needy, scared, or simply done? Here's what nobody talks about. Feeling older than your age can create a kind of invisible loneliness. Not the obvious kind where nobody's around, but the quiet kind, where people are around you all the time and still don't really meet you. They come to you for advice. They tell you how strong you are. They assume you can handle it. They assume you don't need much. And maybe part of you helped build that image because it was safer to be respected than to be vulnerable. But another part of you may have been starving for someone to notice that being the steady one doesn't mean you were never overwhelmed. Then comes the darker layer. Some people who felt older than their age were never allowed to have normal emotional chaos without consequences. Maybe sadness made things harder at home. Maybe anger felt dangerous. Maybe your fear had nowhere to go because there was already too much fear in the room. So instead of expressing emotion, you organized it. You tucked it away. You turned it into competence. And over time, that can create a person who looks remarkably put together while feeling strangely disconnected from their own softness, spontaneity, even their own joy. That's why adulthood can feel so confusing for people like this. Everyone expects adulthood to feel natural because you looked prepared for it so early. But the truth is, early seriousness doesn't always create healthy adulthood. Sometimes it creates a person who knows how to function, but not how to feel safe while resting. A person who can lead but struggles to receive. A person who can understand everyone in the room except themselves. A person who seems wise but privately feels ancient in the worst way, like life started too early and never really loosened its grip. And yet, this doesn't mean your depth is fake. It doesn't mean your sensitivity is just damage. It doesn't mean every serious child was wounded or every mature person is secretly broken. There is a healthy version of this trait too. Some people are naturally reflective, observant, emotionally nuanced. Some children are genuinely old souls in the poetic sense. But the painful version carries a specific feeling. It feels heavy. It feels vigilant. It feels like your worth is tied to how well you hold everything together. And when that is the deeper pattern, what looks like maturity might actually be unhealed responsibility wearing elegant clothes.
The real difference is this. Healthy maturity lets you be deep without punishing you for being human. Unhealthy maturity makes you feel like falling apart would be a moral failure. Healthy wisdom includes play, rest, mistakes, and emotional honesty. Survival-based maturity often feels rigid, over-controlled, and weirdly joyless. One is growth, the other is armor.
So what do people usually get wrong about someone who has always felt older than their age? They think you're simply built for more, that you don't need much, that you were lucky to become so wise so early. But the hidden truth is that many people like this were not carried into wisdom. They were pushed into it. They learned to become steady because instability was too expensive. They learned to become thoughtful because someone had to notice what was going unsaid. They learned to become emotionally older because being emotionally young didn't feel protected enough to survive. And if this is you, the insight that changes everything is not that your whole personality is a wound. It's that some parts of you may have been shaped in emergency conditions. That changes the story. It means your seriousness was not random. Your tiredness was not laziness. Your distance was not coldness. Your need for control was not weakness. These patterns had logic. They came from somewhere. And once you see that, you can stop worshiping the mask as if it were your only self. Because you're not broken for feeling older than your age. You're not simply failing to relax, failing to connect, failing to be carefree enough. You may be responding exactly the way a person responds when childhood taught them that emotional gravity arrives early and doesn't ask permission. The tired wisdom, the detachment, the strange mix of depth and loneliness, it all has a pattern. And the moment you see the pattern, you begin separating who you are from what you had to become. Maybe you really are thoughtful. Maybe you really are unusually perceptive. Maybe your depth is real and beautiful. But you were never meant to earn it by carrying what should have been shared. You were never meant to confuse being valued with being useful. You were never meant to feel ancient before you had even been allowed to feel young. So, if you've always felt older than your age, maybe the question is not why you were never like everyone else. Maybe the question is what happened that made your nervous system believe it had to leave childhood early. That's not self-pity. That's clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the first moment your life stops feeling like a personality flaw and starts feeling like emotional sense. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, stay with this channel, because there's a lot more beneath the behaviors people dismiss too quickly. And if you want to go deeper, the next video will help you understand another hidden pattern that shapes who you become long before you have words for it.